think. This Hangout is live. Okay, welcome everybody to Photography How To. My name is Ed Mercer, and I'm a professional photographer and internet marketer. And I'm here with my partner Norma Rickman, and she's going to introduce herself real quick, and then we're going to go into a little bit of information about how to do some different things with photography. All set, Norma?
Okay, I'm Norma Rickman. I'm a copywriter by trade and working on some projects with Ed, and Ed's got me addicted to photography too. I've got the photography bug. I've been doing it probably for about 4 or 5 months, I guess. So compared to Ed's experience, I don't have a lot, so that's why we're a good team, because I can ask him the questions that I don't know. So we'll go from there.
Okay, cool. So the way we're going to kind of do this here is I'm going to explain some things to Norma, but she's going to be asking me questions, and hopefully that'll be helpful to everybody out there, because she is a newbie, and these are kind of the questions that people might want to know, and hopefully I have all the answers for it. So I'm going to start off talking a little bit, and I'm going to go over to my desktop to share some things that I want to explain to Norma, and then she'll kind of interject and ask me questions. And we don't expect anybody to be on this here particular hangout, but you never know. We set it live, so if someone pops in, if you can ask questions, feel free to. We're kind of getting acclimated to this way of doing things, so it might take us a little while to be fluent with it. But here we go. We're going to switch over to my screen desktop here. Okay. All right, now we're going to bring this down because we got the little infinity screen and we're seeing things forever. So Norma, do you see my screen, my desktop now?
Yes, I do, Ed.
Okay. So I'm just going to explain something real quick to Norma here, because, like I say, a few months ago, Norma got herself a camera, and she's been asking me some different questions, and she's kind of got the bug big time. So, one of the things she was asking me about was she was trying to photograph some things in snow, because Norma is from Canada and she already has snow. A foot, is that right, Norma? Did you get a foot of snow?
Yeah, we've got about a foot of snow already.
All right, well, lucky you. So you're going to be taking a lot of pictures of white for walks. My guess is you're not going to see green again until you go on vacation or something like that.
For me, yeah.
There you go. So anyways, Norma was photographing some things out her window the other day in the snow, and she has a brand new Nikon D3200, and she was having trouble getting it to focus for her. She said it was going cuckoo and out of range and everything. Wouldn't focus. And I explained to her that the digital cameras have a lot of trouble sometimes when you have an extreme contrast, where you have a lot of white or dark or things like that, and at that point you have to change your camera over to manual focus. So you have to take it off autofocus, which I know we all hate to do, but sometimes if you want to get your images, you got to do that. So I explained that to Norma, and she was able to go and take some pictures, and she said that worked real well for her. And then she just had to remember to turn it back to autofocus after, because it does make life easier. But one of the things we discussed about as we went into the problem with focusing and things like that is something in photography called bracketing. Okay, and if you look on my computer screen here, you'll see that I have a folder open with a bunch of images in it. And I do a lot of HDR photography, and I'm not going to get into HDR photography because that's a little advanced, and that's the subject for another day. But what it basically means is that I bracket my photos, and bracketing photos means that I can take 3, 5, 7, up to 9 pictures of the same image. And the reason you would do that, for a beginner photographer, is just if you get a really nice picture and you're not sure about the exposure, what bracketing is that the first exposure, what the camera tells you, is the correct exposure. Okay, I usually bracket in 5s. Okay, so the first picture that the camera tells me is the correct exposure, and then I shoot another shot that's 1 stop overexposed, and I shoot another shot that's 2 stops overexposed, then I shoot a shot that's 1 stop underexposed and 2 stops underexposed. So if you look on this folder that I have up here right now, you can see that I have a bunch of images, and you can see that they all have different colors on them. So normally when you come in from a photo shoot, you're going to import the images that you took from your camera onto a folder on your desktop. Okay, sometimes you might just, do it with an SD card, or you might run a cord into your computer. Either way, you're going to import them into your computer. Okay, so when I do it, they don't come with all these colors in them like this here. Okay, they're just, they're just with the JPEG numbers on them and the file sizes underneath. That's what this here is. Now, something I told Norma that I'd explain to her. Now, we work on Macs, okay? And just, I'm not sure about how PCs work as far as color coding things and stuff like that, but as far as importing them into a folder, it all works the same. But for those of you that work on a Mac and you bracket your photos, I like to color code them so that I know that they're all the same picture. And you can see when I go out and shoot, I'm taking anywhere from 200 to 1,000 pictures. Most people don't do that. So, if you look right here, I'm going to show you, and just one other thing before I go beyond here. I explained to Norma that, sometimes, when you get your pictures and you input them into a folder, I'm just going to activate this here. If you go and your folder's activated like this here, you go up into the view, and you click on view, and then when you go down here to show view options, okay, normally when you have imported your pictures, they're going to look this small. Okay, that's how small they all look. Okay, so it's really hard to see them. Okay, let me see. That's about what they're going to look like right there. So I usually go into the view, I click on the view options, and I make them quite a bit bigger so that I can see them. I mean, you can make them really big so you can look at them without having to get into Bridge or some other things, fancy Photoshop areas. Okay, but for the purpose of bracketing, which is what we're going to talk about here, I'll stop talking about all those things and just explain to you the bracket. Let's just make that a teeny bit bigger. And then after I explain this here, I'll let Norm come in here and ask her questions. Okay, but if you look here in the blue, like I said, all up and down here, you'll see that I've done all the color coding for all the things that I bracketed. Now I've probably lost my place of the picture I wanted to do. That's why I had it locked in there. Norm, okay, let me go back and find it. All right. I mean, I've got all kinds of, but okay, there it is right there. All right. So here's the 5 images that I want to talk about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. The first one here, as I click on that, okay, this is what the camera tells me to expose my image for. Okay. There it is. Okay. So that's the proper exposure according to the camera. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that. Most people would be anyways, but sometimes all this white and these different things will confuse you. Okay, so then what I do from there is, down here on the blue, again, these are all the same spot. This one here, as I click, I know that that's 2 stops under because that's the darkest one. Okay, so that's obviously going to be too dark, but for HDR purposes, I use all of these images. Okay, so that's 2 stops. That's 1 stop underexposed. Okay, this one here is 1 stop overexposed. Okay, and this one here is 2 stops overexposed. All right, now for the purposes of everybody out there that's a beginning photographer, the reason you want to do that is because this one here is pretty evenly lit, the first one that I showed you. But a lot of times, if the camera gets fooled and it reads things wrong, so if you see a really nice scene that you want to make sure you get it, this is all digital stuff, and you can dump and throw away the images that you don't use. So you want to make sure. So it's a good idea to overexpose by a couple and underexpose a couple, and then you're for sure going to have the right shot. Okay, and that's what bracketing is. And you don't have to do 5. You can do it just, you can do your regular shot. You can do 1 stop over, 1 stop under. You can do 3 stops over and under. I mean, you can go as far as you want with it. But it's just kind of insurance to make sure that you get your shot right on, because a lot of times the scene that you see that's so beautiful, you might not be able to get it again. So it's worth it to take the extra 30 seconds to take the extra couple of shots and get it right. So that's what photo bracketing is, and I'm going to kind of let Norma get in here now and ask me any questions about that, about autofocus, about any things I discussed here, and see what she has to say. You still there, Norma?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, I didn't want to say all that for nothing. Have to say it again.
Another thing we talked about the other day was changing your metering when you're shooting something in the snow. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, when you're photographing things in the snow, and I don't want to get real technical, but I'll just say this here. You know, the camera is set up to read 18% gray. That's how it determines exposure. And when you have snow and you have dark things and stuff like that, it tricks the exposure meters a lot of the time inside the camera. So what you want to do is, you know, your camera is usually set up with a bunch of different exposure. Depending on how advanced your camera is, if you have an SLR, then you can go in there and you can do what's called spot metering, where the camera will come in and read a small section of the picture. So if you were taking a picture of your dog out in the snow, then you would try and make sure that the little spot inside the viewfinder of your camera is on the dog so that it's reading that exposure, at least for the smallest section, because you know the other exposure areas inside of there, sometimes it'll read for like 30% of the image area, 50% of the image, or 100% of the image area. So obviously if you're in the snow and you really contrast these situations, then you want to get as close to the darker image inside of there, otherwise it's going to blow out and it's going to read primarily the snow scene, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it'll take whatever there's the most of and then meter for that. Is that
Correct.
okay?
Correct. And when you have a lot of the white area, like with the snow or sky or things like that, that's why if some people have a point and shoot camera, so they're gonna have to switch over to manual and just shoot over and under. They're not gonna have the luxury of picking their exposure area that it picks for them with spot metering and things like that.
Okay, another problem I've had trying to shoot snow is it looks all kind of blue-gray, and maybe you could talk about that a little bit too, why that is.
Yeah, yeah. When you're shooting snow or the white sky or different things like that, another setting that you have in your camera is called white balance. Okay, and it's an area in your menu, and all cameras have it in a different way. But usually your camera manual will tell you about it. But the main thing is that there are different types of white balance you have depending on the type of lighting that you have. Most of the time, you should set your camera to auto white balance, and they do 90% of the time they're going to be right on and pick the right white balance for you. But where that comes into a problem sometimes, it can be with snow sometimes, and more often than not it's indoors when you have fluorescent lights or different types of lighting situations. And that can be corrected also when you're doing post-processing with Photoshop or Lightroom or things like that. And that's something that we'll get into in another lesson where I'll bring in and I'll show you some problem images that have the blue cast like you talked about, and how you can go in there with your eyedrop tool and fix the white balance. So even if you didn't set it properly before, almost everything can be fixed with Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever editing program you want. So everything isn't lost. You can usually always fix it.
That's a good thing, because some of my stuff needs a lot of fixing.
I think most people's stuff does need fixing all of the time, Norm. I mean, I know it because I've been doing it for 30 years, so I've been trained to go in there and look for certain things, and I'm on it 7 or 8 hours a day, so eventually you better get pretty good at it or you're in trouble. Yeah. But like we did some pictures the other day with you. Like I say, we're not going to get into 50 different lessons here, but you took some beautiful pictures of a bird, a kind of chubby bluebird that was on your bird feeder outside your window, and it was really nice. And one of the things that we'll talk about later on is we're going to want to show you how to get what's called bokeh, B-O-K-E-H, where the image that you're shooting is very sharp, but everything else in behind it is soft, because the birdhouse was in the tree that you had, but there were a lot of branches, and because you probably shot it at a fairly high aperture setting, everything was in focus, and what we would like to get is the the bird in focus and all the limbs and stuff like that around kind of soft, so it brings the attention to the bird. That's how you want things to go. And then, like I said, we did some different corrections on it and stuff like that. That, you know, as long as you get a nice exposed image, you can go in and do all kinds of cool things to fix it after. You know, sometimes you don't have the luxury of time to get it exactly the way you want, especially with birds and animals. You know, you got to be fast. But that's what I say about that.
I usually try to shoot in aperture mode, but sometimes, like because of the snow, that didn't work this time. So I didn't get the branches blurry as I would have liked to.
Right, and sometimes, you know, again, like I said, we're getting into a lot of lessons more than we want to, but, you know, in that case there, you can control that a lot by setting your ISO, is how sensitive your images are to light. So you could have probably dropped it down to maybe 100 ISO in your camera, and then dropped it down 2 more stops with exposure compensation. And if you were shooting at f11, that might have brought you down to maybe 5, 6. Would have softened it up a little bit. And I apologize to the folks out there that, you know, I might be talking over your head. I mean, we'll get into those lessons about aperture priority and some of the other things we were talking about. But like I say, I kind of want to. I think the easiest way for people to learn is, you know, Norma's a newbie, so she asks me questions, and maybe you can pick up on it. As we go along and we get more people involved, you can send them specific questions about things that, you know, you don't understand that I talked about, and we'll definitely cover that and put that onto our membership site and cover it in future Hangouts that we're doing here.
Well, I think you've covered some good stuff today, so I don't really have any more questions about that.
Yeah, well, like I said, we don't want to get into too many things. Like I say, I mean, you know, I sure don't know much, but photography I do know, so I can ramble on, and people don't want to hear that. But our thing that we want to do is just kind of keep things simple, keep it to a short amount of time, so they can learn a little bit at a time, and then pick up things, you know, on our membership site and stuff like that. So I think that's all good. I think we can close out with this here, and just try and get better as we go along in the presentation of things. But, you know, hopefully they understood everything I talked about here, and that should do it.
Okay, well, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
You got it. All right, let me get here, and you must be underneath here someplace. You are down here. I'm going to go down here, and I'm just going to stop the broadcast.